Welcome, David.
Thank you.
I'm so
A
excited.
rowdy crowd.
Yeah, well, they're very excited to see you here. These are all fans who saw you were going to be here and signed up specifically for you. So,
Well, thank you.
you are a very, very busy man. This
Guess so,
this
yeah.
season on Broadway, you already have Hamilton, which is doing pretty well from what I hear.
It's gonna stick
some
around
people
for
have
me.
heard of it. Tickets are selling okay. Dear Evan Hansen is in tech right now.
Correct.
And then you have two other shows coming to Broadway in the next few months, Bandstand and Warpaint.
Yes.
So
You've done your research beautifully.
We're just getting started. I don't know that there's ever been a set designer who's had 4 shows running on Broadway at the same time. Do you know if that's a first?
I don't know. It has to have happened before. Let's go with yes. It's happened.
It's happened before. Can you just get a couple more and just maybe you could get every show on Broadway and just have done?
I don't know. There's a couple that I think are sticking around.
Yeah, you think?
Yeah.
You can't go in and redesign the sets for Phantom of the Opera?
Definitely not. That holds up, actually. I went and saw it for the first time probably 6 years ago, and I felt like I had seen it. That is an unbelievably beautiful design. I think if it opened this year, it would probably win all the Tony Awards again.
Yeah.
It's beautiful.
So obviously, when you go to the theater, you're looking at the design. Does it keep you from enjoying the theater as an audience member? Are you nitpicking about like what you would have done, or?
No, I'm not nitpicking about what I would have done, but I definitely sit down and I kind of like can see seams in floors, and I guess and I think to myself, oh, I think that's going to open and that's going to slide and that's going to move, and then I try to shut up, stop talking to myself, and watch the show and enjoy it.
Yeah. Well, I want to talk about Hamilton and Dear Evan Hansen first, and then we'll get into some of your background and talk about what's coming up next for you.
Okay.
As I jokingly, like totally underplayed, Hamilton is the phenomenon of the world right now. And I think you might be one of the most visible set designers in the industry as a result of that. You were featured in the recent Hamilton documentary, and you were nominated for a Tony. And I think you're the only set designer I've ever seen whose set was actually available in terms of a pop-up at the merchandise booth. You could take the Hamilton set home with you.
That's really not fair, because we actually made that in my office, so it's not like they made that on behalf of the set. We had to, make that. Those actually started as, my hope was to make them as an opening night gift for our collaborators on Hamilton, and it took so long to kind of R&D how to make a pop-up of the set.
R&D being research and design, research and development.
And it took a long time and many different iterations, and then we totally missed the opening day. And I sent the only version of it to Jeffrey Seller, the producer of Hamilton, as a gift. And he called me immediately and said, "These things are amazing. They're so cute. Can we sell them?" Mm-hmm. Or I think he said, "We have to sell these. They're so satisfying to open." So it exists, and it's really fun.
It's really, really detailed, and there are even little people who look like they've been individually cut out and stuck in there in the little scaffolding, and I think it's totally gorgeous, and I'm excited that the set itself as a work of art is getting its own moment in spotlight.
Well, thank you. Thank you.
And in fact, in hearing myself say the word scaffolding, I know that the concept of scaffolding was really important to you when creating this design. That I've heard you say this show is not about building the foundation of the country so much as building the scaffolding of the country, and that was kind of your in for this particular design.
Yeah, and I felt, and I've talked about, obviously the creation of the set for Hamilton a lot, but I felt such a huge responsibility to Lin and Tommy and the rest of the creative team. In a way, it's like the best part of getting the job, or the best part of doing a job is getting the job. You're like, congratulations, you got the job, and you think, oh God, now I've got to go make the thing. Mm-hmm. We went through a very long process of creating the show, and what was interesting was Lin and Tommy and Andy did not have an idea of what the show wanted to look like when they hired me, nothing at all. And it was obviously this staggering work of genius, which I believe it to be. And they dropped this 51-song, 25,000-word document on my desk, and then we all kind of jumped off the creative cliff together and talked about what would that world possibly look like. And when you really look at the show, you're not talking about the people who built the country, but they did build the foundation from which the country was built, or the scaffolding from which the foundation was built. And it's so incredible to think about that scaffolding today, 3 days after an election, and just think about how Alexander Hamilton created the Electoral College, and how unbelievably potent and powerful his work is still today. So, wow,
Yeah.
here we are.
Yeah, that's a lot. I know that you were one of the few members of the lead creatives that actually had to audition or apply for your job with Hamilton.
It's true.
Can you talk about how that came to be and how you actually, do you use the word audition for a
I called it
creative
interview.
position?
I have been friends and peers and collaborators with Lin and Tommy and Andy and Alex Lacamoire in every which combination. I've done shows with all of them individually and together as a unit prior to my interview for the show. And I was up at New York Stage and Film at Vassar College when they were workshopping what was then what would become the first act of Hamilton, and I saw Tommy in the quad. I was up there working on a different show, and I said, you know, listen, I know that you're up here working on Hamilton. When it comes time to hire a set designer, I'd like to throw my hat into the ring. And 2 years later, after they had come back up the next summer, and I had probably designed 4 or 5 shows with Tommy and worked on many shows with Andy and Lin, I got a phone call from Tommy and said, I'd like for you to interview for the job, which is a little bit weird because I was currently designing a show for him on Broadway. But I took it very seriously because be careful what you wish for, who you decide to collaborate with. In success, you could be working with them for years and years and years, and may we work together for years and years and years. So I got that phone call, and I got a copy of the script, and I got a copy of the music, and the score was all of it plinked out on a computer, and Lin singing every single track.
What I would give to hear those demos, by the way.
Yeah, give Lin a couple minutes. I'm sure he'll send it out to the world.
He's posted a couple on his SoundCloud again.
And by the way, I've never worked on a show that once you start previewing, every single song came out almost fully formed and almost never revised, in order. Wow. It really is kind of a touched by God thing that he created. But I got this thing plinked out, and I read it, and I studied. And I did not take this opportunity lightly to audition for the show or to interview for it. And I did a lot of research, I did a lot of sketches, I did a whole scene breakdown figuring out what happened in every single scene, and I sat down with Tommy at the Public Theater, and I showed him my sketches, and I just kind of, you know, you say, you can't get the milk for free if you don't buy the cow. I gave him all the milk. I put it all on the table, and I just said, I've done all this work, and I have no idea what the right answer is, but I am so excited to go on this journey with you if I'm given the shot. And I literally said to him, you know, listen, I'm like Madison to your Jefferson. You know, if you give me this shot, I'm not going to throw away my shot. And I mean, and I said, you have to do this. We are peers, and I will work so hard for this. And then I got it, which is
How many hours did you put in before you found out the job was yours?
Oh, I don't know. 30, 40. I remember bringing home that recording, and my oldest daughter was then, you know, I don't know, that was 4 years ago or something, and I said, I am working on a presentation for Tommy. She knew Tommy, she had seen a lot of our work together, and it's a show about Alexander Hamilton and the Founding Fathers rapping, and she was like, this is not gonna be good. And I played her the opening number, and she thought, okay. She remembered, you know, immediately went pencil to his temple, like, and she started, you know. And I thought, this is going to get traction. This is going to be good. I spent many hours listening to it with her, and then I got the job.
Awesome. So Hamilton is obviously based in history. There are actual monuments, actual locations, and historical artifacts that you can look at for inspiration, whereas something like Dear Evan Hansen is based in right now, and it's totally, fully original, out of the minds of the creators. How is the design process different when you can actually look at, visit, and touch things versus trying to sort of get in via ESP into the creators' heads?
Well, I actually attack every single design challenge the same exact way. I mean, obviously, each one has its own challenges, but Dear Evan Hansen does take place in very real places. Now, it doesn't say it's the Schuyler home, right? What does the Hansen, you know, Dear Evan Hansen, or Evan Hansen's bedroom look like? There is no blueprint for that. We can't go to a specific place. But really, I liken my job to one of a psychologist. I think about what this person's space is. And I have to, if it's not a real place, like in the example of Hamilton, we can go and look at what George Washington's tent looked like or what his office at the White House looked like, and it's obviously vastly, beautifully documented. But in Evan Hansen, you make it up. And then you go and find research that supports it. So I look at each one of these places as realistically as I can, and I try and, when something like, Dear Evan Hansen comes up, where there isn't actually a specific place where it says it takes place at this documented place, I make it up and I think to myself, what would Evan have? So he's a socially awkward kid. There are probably not lots of pictures of his friends around, or whatever that is, and I start to add in all the dramaturgical details, and I find things like that to support, and I use that research as a way to begin a conversation with my collaborators. In this case, it was Michael Greif and Ben Pasek and Justin Paul and Stephen Levinson, and we talked a lot about what would the places in this show look like. There's the alternative, which is that the Murphys, the kind of wealthy family that takes Evan in the show, very specifically needed to show a different socioeconomic situation. They're a tight-knit family with, one outsider as a child, and what would that look like? And there are so many clues in the text of what that would look like. You just kind of make it up, and you really dig into the psychology of the people.
One thing that I'm so fascinated about regarding design is that it isn't just the architecture, which I think the architecture is kind of front and center with Hamilton. It's literally ropes and beams, but you're also responsible for every tiny micro detail. If somebody has 1,000 books in their shelf, if the set, it takes place in a library, you have to personally choose which books go up there. And I actually grew up going to the theater with my parents, and my dad used to embarrass me because even if we had third row seats, he'd bring binoculars, and he would talk to me about there's a reason. I know, right? But he would say there's a reason that if you can read the titles on the spines of the book, they didn't just go and grab a bunch of books and throw them up there. Somebody chose every single one of those titles. So from a very young age, I've been fascinated by, like I'll see a prescription bottle and I'll try to peer to see what the prescription is on, because I know that it was chosen by someone like you.
It's so true. I mean, first of all, I work with a huge team of people, not just in my office, but many, many collaborators, so I have a lot of help in choosing those things. I try and guide the process, but what you try and do is empower the people working with you to make incredible and specific choices. But it's true, when I was in high school, our drama teacher said, the only stars are in the sky, and at some point, at least one audience member is looking at every single one of you. I think she was trying to make everyone that was not a principal performer, pay attention and stand up straight or do their thing on stage.
Yeah, that was like, there are no small parts.
It's true, but it's fascinating. I've had experiences time and time again where I would choose the tiniest little eyelash on the face of a detail and put it on stage and have an audience member come in and say, oh, that doorknob that you chose brought me to the exact specific place. In fact, one of the biggest compliments I've ever gotten about my work is from a performer who would say, when I step on stage, I don't need to do any character development because I know exactly who I am and who I'm playing and where I am. And we do so many things that are huge and overt and obvious as designers. There's big wooden pieces of scaffolding and a huge brick wall and rope. Everyone can see that. There's a turntable swirling around on stage in Hamilton. But there are also so many tiny, tiny, tiny dramaturgical details, eyelashes, that are there that maybe you catch and maybe you don't, but I believe that they are informing the performer's performance and their experience, and therefore translating to the audience. And in some cases, there's just one person that will pick up on those details, and that is incredibly powerful because we're telling those stories so specifically and as specifically as we can.
And it just like it can bring somebody really into the show, I think getting it slightly wrong can bring someone out of the show. And so the crucial nature of getting it right, I can tell that you take that very seriously. I love the story of your collaboration with Jane Howdy-Shell on The Receptionist, and how you created a desk that really only she could see.
Yeah, and I try and welcome that collaboration in with everything that I do. Another one that popped to my mind is when we were doing Misery last season on Broadway, working with Laurie Metcalf and trying to flesh out what that house was. What does it mean to be a kind of recluse who's living in Colorado? At what point was the house built? When did she take it over? Should we know it was her mother's house? When did she take over the house? At what time was it decorated? Did she continue to decorate it? She's a Paul Sheldon fan, you know, and going deeper and deeper and deeper into the psychology of her living in that space. And the tiniest little details. I mean, we obviously work until, in the way that Lin kept on writing until we had to have press there, and then he had to put his pencil down. We keep working and adding levels of detail throughout. I mean, Jane Houdyshell played the title character, the receptionist in the play, Adam Bach's beautiful play, The Receptionist, and I remember getting so deep with her about what she would have in this desk, because as we all know, people spend, I don't know, way more time at work than doing anything else, right? We think of the cumulative hours, and all the little tiny things that were kind of on the side of her computer that only she would see. And she said to me when I left her when we opened, and I came back weeks later, she said, every single time I deliver that line, I look at this tiny little fortune cookie fortune that I had put on the monitor, and I think about you, and I think about that experience, and then I think about my character and why she would have taped that on, and it informs her choices so much. It's an incredible thing that we get to do and conjure up these worlds and these emotional responses to these physical things.
After a show opens, do you just step away and move on to the next thing, or is there an ongoing collaboration that happens? Are there adjustments made after the fact?
Some adjustments, but really my work is kind of contractually done. I obviously try and stay close to the families that we make. They're kind of like pop-up families and pop-up businesses. And I go back and obviously interact with the people. With a show like Hamilton, there's maintenance that's involved. There's a beautiful, incredible, and talented team that maintains the show, but sometimes you make tweaks to the show to help the show happen better. So this prop that we designed might wind up showing to be too heavy, and might over 8 times a week might be giving someone shoulder issues or something like that. So we'll have a little team meeting and say, well, do we want to change the choreography, the blocking, or the prop, and try and figure that out. But mostly I'm kind of done.
Right. I want to also just acknowledge that you are not just a theatrical designer. Certainly having 4 shows on Broadway would be enough to, I think, keep anybody going in terms of workload. But you are also working with some of the biggest music stars in the world. Anybody heard of Lady Gaga?
The crowd just erupted. You guys, one person was like.
So you've worked with Mariah Carey and Bruno Mars, designed some of the biggest concert tours in the world. You've designed restaurants and operas and I don't know, people's homes, and I guess you'd consider it cross-disciplinary. I don't know that a lot of theatrical set designers are plus, of course, Grease Live.
Right, Grease Live.
The TV phenomenon. And I'm curious as to sort of how you keep all those things straight, the similarities, the differences. I know that's a very wide question.
No, I mean, when I said earlier that I attack every single design process the same way, I mean I attack every single design process the same way, whether it's with a restaurateur or a gallery owner or a pop star or anything. I've been thinking about it a lot because I get that question a lot. I think Grease Live and Hamilton in the same couple of months, was kind of a lightning rod to draw attention to the process of what it would be like, because Tommy Kail and I both worked on those 2 things together. It's interesting. I've been talking a lot recently about how I feel like my job is not one as a designer, but as a storyteller. And from 40,000 feet above sea level, looking down at these problems or these challenges, I really think about what is it that we want to try and accomplish emotionally with a piece. So I'll sit down with someone that owns a restaurant or a gallery or a rock star and say, how do you want people to feel when they're watching this thing or experiencing it, when they go home? What is it that you want people to take away? And really, we kind of then Jedi mind trick people into feeling that way. So is it that you want to feel contemplative? Or do you want to feel happy or exuberant, or what are those things? And I use all the powers that I have, everything at my power, whether it is line and color and perspective and texture and scale, to do that. Or I sit and I kind of really, before we put pen to paper, think of myself as a co-collaborator or a co-director or a co-restaurateur or whatever it is, because I think this place should feel like home. If you're going to a restaurant, you should feel homey. What is the consumer journey when you walk through the door? Is it that you are met with a stodgy hostess or something saying like, oh, do you have a reservation? Or is it like, welcome, here's a cookie, sit down, we've got a table for you. And that does affect your experience. It's the same thing at a rock concert. Is there music that you're hearing pre-show? Are you masking the design? Are you revealing it? How do you want people to feel? So I really attack them in the same way, and then the steps of the design process are the same. We research, we draw, we work out a ground plan or a floor plan, which is figuring out how people will move through space. I do a lot of really fast sketches. I present them, we have a conversation, we talk about what the psychology of things being close together or further away will feel like, how tall is the space, how short is the space, what colors, we talk about that kind of experience. And then we draft it, or we build a model, or we try and find some way that I can communicate to my collaborators. Sometimes it's sketches, sometimes there are renderings, sometimes there's a scale model, which everyone loves because everyone's a sucker for miniatures. And then what they call, when they're building something, value engineer. We call it cutting the scenery, cutting the process. You know, it's gonna cost $4 million. Just kidding, we're gonna cut it away at it. We're gonna value engineer, try and get to the heart of what we really need to build. And then we build it, we install it. In the theater, we tech it. Or in the restaurants, we like have friends and families come and try and figure out like the pacing and how this is gonna go. And then you document it and show it to the world. And it happens the same way in every single process. So it really is about storytelling. It's like, what do you want people to feel when they go home about that experience?
Oh, that's wonderful. We're going to go to the audience for a couple of questions, but first I want to just take a minute to talk about social media, because I think that for some of us who go to the theater regularly, these sets are so gorgeous and intricate, and they look like they've just kind of arrived. They've just, you know, poof, they exist. And you've done such a beautiful job, particularly on your Instagram account, of really demonstrating the amount of work and rework and design and redesign, and that the cutting when necessary and changing. That I think I always love the opportunity to see and appreciate the real effort that goes into something like that.
Thank you. I mean, I have for years been documenting every single step of the process for myself, whether it is the sketching or the drafting or the rendering or the model making or whatever it is, including I have a lucky position in something like a piece of theater because I'm front row center and I can take all these pictures of this thing happening, kind of like show the behind the scenes. When I started using Instagram, I really had no idea what my voice would be or what I had to add to this kind of crazy landscape of just talking heads and voices. And I really felt like the meal that I was serving up, that I could add to this landscape, would be one that I could show you how the sausage got made. I could show you page to stage. Here's how you have an idea, and here's how the way that writing is rewriting, designing is redesigning, and nothing just shows up fully formed. You have to work at it, and I like to show people that work because it's interesting. It's an interesting thought process to think, oh, it could have looked like that. I mean, Hamilton could have looked like a big curved piece of parchment paper with a quill sticking out of it, which was one of the terrible ideas that we had, that it did not wind up becoming, but that was sort of the installation art version of it, and we threw it out, but we continued at it to try and get to the essence of what would be best to support the storytelling. And on Instagram and Twitter and those platforms, I use those platforms to show people the process and to try and inspire through photographs. And to give a sense of what it is like to have a phone call with the Lady Gaga camp, which I did this morning, and then move into a thing like this, and know that I'm meeting with a restaurateur later this afternoon, and know that I'm going to talk about the Hamilton tour, and then I have like a big stacked day, and how one of those things can inform the next one. Because I feel like if you saw Bruno Mars on Saturday Night Live, you would see how the experience of Grease Live informed that performance.
Breaking the fourth wall.
Right, and so I mean, everyone that has worked with me over the years thinks I'm a little crazy, but also I think they understand that the kind of big swath of the work is really, we're fueling our own fires and being inspired by all of these different artists that we collaborate with to make the next one that we collaborate with better and more interesting.
That's very well said.
Well, thanks.
Let's turn it over to the audience for some questions.
Okay.
Hey, David. How you doing, man?
Hey, I'm good.
Thank you so much for being here. I'm a huge fan of yours.
Thanks.
As we move into this very important time, I know you're very politically active on social media, and I personally look to you as a leader. What are your views on the role of art and we as artists healing as a nation and coming together to move forward?
Well, thanks, first of all, for liking the work. I feel, first of all, that artists are need to be responsible for what they put out into the world because we have a platform that is public, and in success, many, many thousands, or in some cases, millions of people see our work. So it's an important voice. I also know that when you're in the theater, you're at a rock concert, or you're in a restaurant, you are smarter together as a community than you are as any single individual. That's most palpable when you're at a show and you think it's funny and someone else laughs, and then like everyone laughs because laughter is contagious, but you also realize, oh right, no, we all agree that that's funny. I feel incredibly blessed and honored to be working on the shows that I'm working on, especially in this moment. I think Hamilton has become, obviously, a shining beacon on the landscape of culture and art in this country and in the world for an important voice and several important voices being shown in the way that it's being shown and presented in the way it's presented, and I think it's a beacon of light. I think Dear Evan Hansen, which happens to be a show about the perils of social media, about bullying, about trying to find a connection both in families and with individuals, and are you getting the straight scoop from someone when you ask them, how are you doing, and then, you know, the answer is like, fine, but really they're crushed and fragile and broken inside. I think that, you know, these are unbelievably important things to be talking about as a culture, and that I get to help lend my voice to that bigger voice, and that starting Monday, you know, 1,200 people a night are gonna be able to see that story, and then on and on. I feel very humbled that I get to do that on a large scale, and I feel like we have a huge responsibility. So I guess, you know, in short, it's you try and do the best that you can in the most kind and gentle and elegant way that you can, but then also, you don't mess around. You use that voice and you wield the power of that voice to really enact a message that says we are better as a community and we are smarter as a community than we are as any one single individual, and I'm kind of holding that torch.
Do we have another question?
What is your favorite show that you've worked on and why?
Oh, wow. Well, I've got 2 kids, and I always feel like that question is a little bit like asking which one of your babies is your favorite baby.
Which one is it?
Obviously, it's the no. Oh, we just cut out for a second. I don't know how to answer that, except obviously in this moment, Hamilton feels. It really feels like the first show I've ever worked on that doesn't feel like just a show, and I don't mean to say just a show. I mean. It really is truly a revolution, and it's been unbelievable to see how from that one apple, they've made apple pie and apple fritters and apple scent and, you know, like all sorts of things, because the fruit that is bore from is so unbelievably powerful and potent that, you know, between the albums and the new albums and the albums still to come, it's just such an unbelievably potent thing, and I think there's so many on-ramps, so that one obviously looms very large. But I have to say, just looking at what's on my plate right now, I am in a very lofty and, you know, I'm very excited about the place that I'm in, which is that I get to pick and choose the things that I get to do, and I have chosen to spend my day doing all the things on my plate right now, and this is not meant to be a political answer, but I feel so honored and excited to be working on every single one of these things, because I think in a way, they all feed different things that we need as a culture. How's that? Is that okay? Okay.
We have time for one more.
Hey, David, thank you for being here.
Sure.
This has been a completely fascinating discussion. I want to get back to Hamilton and stay somewhat political. Earlier, you were talking about the Electoral College, and that played a gigantic role in the future of this country. I like talking to intelligent people and people with all kinds of views. So in your opinion, what role does the Electoral College play, and does it have a place in today's society?
Well, I mean, it has a place in today's society because it exists. And I think that there's a lot of conversation happening around whether it is still a vital part of the government. And I know that Alexander Hamilton and James Madison created it because when they created it, they felt like there wasn't enough studied and prepared citizens to be able to actually vote for who would become the leader of our country. And so the idea behind the Electoral College was that we would all elect people who were really, really smart and could speak on behalf of the group, and then those people would be able to choose our leader. I think it's gotten, I think it speaks volumes that many, many countries have adopted the idea of democracy since the founding of our country, and not one of them has adopted the idea of an electoral college. And so it seems weird and interesting to me that if we were overseeing a fair vote in any other country, the popular vote is called the vote, not elected. So I think it's obviously a hotbed issue. I think that we'll have a lot of people talking about it for a long time, and as they should, but twice in the last, 16 years, we have not elected a president based on the popular vote, but instead we've gone through this strange thing about electoral colleges. And the last thing I'll say is, if we're going to keep the electoral college, which I think my opinion is pretty clear about how I feel about it, we should at least equally weight the amount of electoral college votes that each state gets. I think I saw a statistic recently that if it was equally weighted, California would have something like 139 electoral college votes and not 55. So I think if you're going to do it based on population, it was an idea that was created when the population spreading to the west in the way that it has, or across the country, and pushing the borders of our country, really, I think that would have boggled the mind of Hamilton and Madison thinking about that at that time.
David, I really appreciate you using your platform and your success to let us know what you feel about the issues in the world, and in using your voice in this way and in showing your heart through your work and through your social media. I feel like we're all really, really fortunate to have a chance to be exposed to you, whether we get to actually sit on a stage with you like I am, or whether we get to know you through seeing your work on the stage or connect with you through our computer screens. I think I'm going to go ahead and say I think the world is a better place for having you in it. And
thank you.
I think I speak for all of us when I say thank you very, very much for being here
Thank
with
you
us
so much
today.
for having me. Thank you.
Absolutely.